That's a bad look. That's a Jerry Jones look. That's a Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson type thing.
It's a perfect comparison.
It's your time, South Jersey, and our time on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio for Extending the Play with your host, NFL insider John McMullen. Today's program is presented locally by the Malamut Law Firm and Remax Real Estate and powered regionally by Bet River Party Poker and Dunkin' Donuts. Now, here's John McMullen.
E-A-T-L-E-S, Eagles!
Welcome, South Jersey. I think for once it's not our time. It's not Ryan Rothstein's time. And welcome Ryan into the studio. It's not even Johnny Mac's time. It's Nick Sirianni time. And ready. And we're advance of a blizzard. So, everybody slow down with the milk and the bread and the eggs. You'll be able to get to Wawa. But it's not a good omen that we're going to have a blizzard as Nick Sirianni sweeps into town, Ryan Rothstein.
Well, John, we're just here to set each other up for success. And hold on, let me look at my note cards here. I think, I have it jotted down. The blizzard is a good thing. So there we go.
Yeah, I think Nick would have been better served to just do a quick opening and say, talk from the heart. Thank some people. I mean, you have to thank Frank Reich. You have to thank the Indianapolis Colts. And then you thank Mr. Lurie. You thank Howie Roseman. And you get into it. And I think that would have cleared things up. The fact that you're stumbling through your note cards like a high school kid who's, going through his first debate and he's a little nervous. And we're going to be talking about experience. I think that is a big theme with this coaching staff. But, I want to start the show with the opening act. And the opening act was Jeffrey Lurie. And the fact that, this is like how I described, it's not, I don't know who opened up for Sinatra back in the day in the lounge. But, you got to know, nobody's there to see you. Jeffrey likes to talk and he likes to expound on numerous issues that go far beyond football. But I timed it. It was over 15 minutes, number one. And number two, he didn't mention the new head coach of this team until 8.5 minutes in. By that time, I had already forgotten the name of the head coach.
What was he saying in the first 8.5 minutes?
You
don't know.
The funny part is when you're on these Zoom conference calls, you can change up the view and you can look at the people that are on the call with you. And I did that at one point, and boy, there were a lot of bored people. And I had to see, Jeffrey's, I think he's still in Florida. It's hard to tell in these things.
I'm sure he is.
Yeah, I would be.
Yeah, why wouldn't you be? I'm not knocking him for that,
yeah. So I'm assuming he was still in Palm Beach, but he's got that total view of all 60-something reporters, and boy, nobody was paying attention about 5-6 minutes in. But he kept going.
Hey.
He likes to hear himself talk.
It's like a stand-up, and you're just looking out into the crowd with the big light shining down. You can't really see the faces, but you don't hear the laughs. I have to imagine that's how he felt, but he powered through.
He did power through, and he did. When I kind of joke, he was talking about the process of what he went through, trying to explain the hire, because obviously Nick Sirianni wasn't in the forefront of people's minds. Now, it's also, he was an offensive coordinator in this league. It's not like nobody didn't know who he was, but he didn't get, to this point, he had never gotten a lot of talk or a lot of buzz about being a future head coaching candidate. So he went through the process, and it basically, we've been around Jeffrey Lurie in this town, in the Delaware Valley for over 25 years now, and it's really never changed. And he starts with 25 candidates. He whittles that down to 10. Interestingly, he actually interviewed 10. I don't think his original whittling down to 10, I don't think that's the 10 names he got in for interviews, because there's no question he wanted to talk with certain guys, Mike Kapka, Brandon Stokely, Brandon Staley, people like that. So I don't think he got his final 10 in there. And then they go down to the finalists, which by all accounts were Josh McDaniels, Deuce Staley, and Nick Sirianni. And that's what he was kind of trying to go through. But boy, he was. I think I'm lulling people to sleep just explaining his goofy process.
Oh no, I mean it's just. I think it is a microcosm of one of the many issues that we feel is wrong with this franchise right now. And I've compared Jeffrey Lurie to Jerry Jones lately, and I know you have as well.
Closer, man.
It's
getting closer.
He is. And I've said this before, and you've kind of corrected me on it, but I still feel like he hasn't always been this bad, he being Jeffrey Lurie. But you know better than me. You say he has.
He hasn't always been this bad. I think that's been an evolution. Certainly in Andy Reid's reign in Philadelphia. I mean, he once Andy, kind of two phases. I mean, Andy was unknown in 1999, so he had to build up some goodwill, so to speak, with the organization. Once he did that, though, he was kind of left alone. I mean, Andy was allowed to do what he wanted to do for the most part. And then I think that kind of shifted. Interestingly, when he had the high-profile issues with his family, he had to leave the organization to take care of things at home for a little part, and I think Joe Banner kind of seized on that opportunity.
Yeah.
But there was a long period there when he kind of stayed out of the way. Now, the strange thing to me is ever since you have the ultimate success, which is Super Bowl 52, it seems like he has grabbed more power. And that's kind of counterintuitive, at least to me. I would think.
Yeah.
I've said it pretty consistently. I mean, look, Doug Peterson was a guy that did what even Andy Reid couldn't do for your organization.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by the way you've acted, and I'm talking to Jeffrey Lurie, but I'll use Ryan Rothstein as my stand-in for Jeffrey Lurie. By the way you've acted, Ryan, you seem to think you're more responsible for that championship than the head coach, by extension Howie Roseman as well. That's a bad look. That's a Jerry Jones look. That's a Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson type thing.
It's a perfect comparison.
And I know I was talking to you off the air yesterday. I wanted to bring up Tony Dungy because I've said this on our shows. I've said it on different platforms. The talk around the league was the Eagles didn't want to go the Andy Reid route again, so to speak, and take a head coach, whether it's Eric Bieniemy, whether it's Mike Kapka from Andy Reid. And what does that come down to? It just comes down to an owner who doesn't want to say, oh, Andy's responsible for all my success. That's how I read that. Is there another way to read it?
I don't know how there can be another way to read it. What you don't want to go the Andy Reid route? What are you talking about? Andy Reid's the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. You're not hiring Andy Reid.
There's only two teams that got to play next week.
Exactly. I mean, what? Because a guy worked with a guy that you once employed, you cannot go that quote-unquote direction? It doesn't make any sense. This has ego and insecurity written all over it. And maybe there's another explanation that no one knows about, but that's the only logical, common sense one that I can think of, John.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, and I've tried to look at it from every different angle and tried to say, well, how does this make sense other than, obviously, Doug Peterson, you just fired him. So you can argue, well, you don't want to go in the same direction because then why are you firing Doug Peterson? But you still went in the same direction. Just, if you think about the tree and the branches. I mean, this is Frank Reich. So this is, I've joked, instead of in 2016, the Eagles couldn't get Adam Gase, couldn't get Ben McAdoo, and they said, let's call Andy. What does Andy think?
Yeah.
And this time, they start late. They can't get Robert Saleh. They can't get Arthur Smith. They can't get Brandon Staley to interview. So let's call Frank Reich.
Right. Yeah, because Andy ignored the call.
And potentially because of the way the Eagles handled the Peterson situation, who isn't Andy. I mean, Andy is probably a little bit upset by that as well. And then you have some Deuce Staley issues, to be honest. When you think about bringing in an Eric Bieniemy type, do you really want another minority Rooney Rule candidate, so to speak, to jump over Deuce Staley? How do you spin that? But Mike Kafka, I mean, you're going to have the same thing with Mike Kafka. The Eagles love him by all accounts. And Nick Sirianni, yes, inexperienced, but we're going to be talking about that a lot with Nick Sirianni.
Yeah, either way, it's full of inexperience. And I look at it this way. Jeffrey Lurie has to feel like it was always him, like you said. And I don't know the responsibility delegation with Doug Peterson from the start, but he must have never trusted Doug Peterson. To be able to fire someone who wins the Super Bowl 2-3 years ago, that's the only way I can look at it, is he never trusted him from the start. So firing him is much easier, right?
Yeah.
How else?
There is no other explanation. And then when you take it to the next step, and again, you've had, and this is kind of what Tony Dungy said as well, you had a coach who was here for 5 years, won you a Super Bowl, made the playoffs 3 times. That's not good enough. And your next step is to bring in an inexperienced coach, and maybe Nick Sirianni turns into the reincarnation of Vince Lombardi with a better stubble, with as I call a higher stubble ceiling.
Right.
Maybe he turns into that. But the fact is, from moment one, you're giving him more power when it comes to hiring his own coaches. And that, to me, is just unbelievable, and I can't explain it. And if I go on to cover this team for another 25 years, which is probably not going to happen, but nonetheless, with Jeffrey Lurie in tow, I will never understand that part of it. Never.
No, neither will I. And that's why when I bring up maybe he never trusted Doug from the start, he's doing things differently now. Like, okay, I need to take a step back and let him hire his coaching staff. But I still question if he actually said, okay, this is your staff. Like, I still feel like those guys were available and they had the writing on the wall. If we go the Sirianni direction, here's the staff that we can put together. And they liked those guys from the start.
Well, it is a powerhouse staff, and we're going to get into that staff as we go to the break, kind of doing it the way the Eagles did at South Jersey. Jeffrey Lurie's your opener now. Nick Sirianni. More extending the play after the break here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.